Welcome to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I've seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick. This is my first time watching all these episodes.
And today we are reviewing Season 2, Episode 11, Organ Grinder. Original air date is December 13th, 2001. Director is Allison Liddy Brown, who I feel like that doesn't sound familiar to me. So I wonder if this is a first-time director for CSI, or I'm just forgetting her name, which if I am, sorry, Allison.
Maybe we need
Writers,
a director tracker or something.
Yeah,
I've never really paid attention to them.
Yeah, I just say them each time, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I've said that name before, but that one it's not ringing any bells. But the writers all ring bells. We have Anthony Zeiger, of course, our spot the guest star from last week.
Cashier Anthony Zeiger.
Cashier Anthony Zeiger, Anne Donahue, and Elizabeth Devine. And we start the episode, crazy enough, with shots of the Vegas Strip, and then we kind of like hone in on a casino. So, Nick, what is our Las Vegas score for today's episode?
I think we have a fairly respectable 31 Las Vegas score.
Okay, pretty good.
Especially after maxing out on the
I was going to say
Las
it's
Vegas.
Hard. Yeah, it's hard when we maxed out on the
last episode. I think I've finally locked in the methodology for this season. So going forward, probably going to be pretty consistent.
Okay.
In total, we have like 2 scenes at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Throughout the episode, we got a couple more scenes. It ends up being about 16 seconds of Las Vegas Strip footage. But we also have there's a whole scene in the casino with the elevator.
Yes.
There's very so basically, if you are Vegas-y outside of the strip shots, you're going to get 1 bonus point per scene.
Okay.
That's my new rule. So
okay. I like it.
Harken back to remember the scene where the episode where the mob guy was shot in the elevator, and they're down. There's a lot of Vegas strip scenes or in a casino in there. We'll start racking. You could probably rack up a bunch of points with these on location casino shots, but this episode we'll just get a few of them, including obviously the one I just alluded to. We have sort of an opening casino scene, but notably, and this is what really cemented it in my mind this episode, gratuitous background shots of the Strip through windows this episode.
Yes.
One in a hotel room, fine, that's okay. One in a hospital room. I don't know what hospital has that amazing view of the Strip behind it.
I don't want to know.
If I get hit by a truck, that's where I want them to bring me.
Well, I was just about to say, I was like, I don't want to know, because I will be, fun fact, listeners, I will be in Vegas in August for a completely different fandom. But I don't want the hospital to be one of my stops.
I mean, that's fair.
While I am in Vegas.
But if it was out of your control and you had to be in the hospital,
yeah, I mean,
would you not want to have that room?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So, speaking of Vegas and casinos and all that fun stuff, we go inside the casino. We see a man bringing a woman up to his room. He is being totally skeevy, oh, I would never lie to you, and blah blah blah, just saying all the right things to get this woman up to his room, even though she's kind of a little hesitant about going up. So they're making out.
This is the most late 90s, early 2000s thing ever, where we've gotten to a point in whenever we depict men and women and burgeoning relationships where the guy is always being oh no, don't worry about it, just have sex with me.
Yeah, come on, baby.
stop being this or that, or super and in hindsight it's oh my god.
Yeah, it's a difficult.
I was indoctrinated with this mantra of pushing good. People, and it's
not taking no as no and taking no as a maybe. No is no, folks. I think you probably know that if you've been listening to our podcast long enough, but just, reiterating, no means no. So they end up in the elevator, they're making out. Then the woman starts screaming. There's I guess not quite dead body. I put dead body and then technically not quite dead at this point.
Still breathing.
But there is a incapacitated body crumpled up in the corner of the elevator. This brings us to Grissom and Sarah. They're on scene with Jim Brass. He's talking about how an anonymous call was made to 911. A man called 911, and they took some pictures of the body before they took the victim to the hospital because, again, they were not legally deceased. So like EMTs took the person away via ambulance. And as they're kind of like looking at the pictures, they realized that the body was redressed. So someone dressed the body. They did not dress themselves because of like all 3 buttons on the suit. And you'd have to tell me this. I've never worn, I want to wear a suit jacket, but I've never worn a suit jacket. So I'm like, I don't know the appropriate.
You could pull off a suit jacket. You'd be
yeah, no, I mean, I think I could do it. I just like, I'd want to get one like custom fitted, you know, like I don't want a baggy one.
Yeah, typically when you're wearing a jacket, you're often only buttoning like one button most of the time. Sometimes, like, I think the standard is like a 2-button, but obviously like a 3-button jacket going low, because what happens is you tend to unbutton it when you sit down.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because your stomach, especially if you're
it's going to be
any weight on you,
it.
might push out and start opening up. And so you don't really necessarily button all the buttons unless you're trying to look formal. I don't know if they make reference to a wedding or a funeral or something that like he clearly wasn't going to, so why would he button all 3 buttons?
All 3 buttons.
But I mean, like, also I've probably only worn a suit jacket in my life a total of like 10 days. You know, I never had a job where I had to wear one every day.
Right.
And so weddings, funerals,
so you were probably like buttoning up for
job interviews like early on in my career when jackets were still very much a requirement.
I was going to say, I did have a suit jacket because I did buy a suit to interview with when I was much, much younger. Now I'm like, really? I mean, it's been a while since I've interviewed, but the last time I interviewed, I was like, I'll dress nice, but like, I'm not wearing a suit. Like, if you're going to not hire me because I'm not wearing a suit, then like, we're not a good match for one another. So
I always get like nervous sometimes going to really nice restaurants thinking like, do I need a jacket?
Yeah, do you need to have a jacket?
I don't really own a suit jacket anymore. I've people listening probably don't know this, but I've had a lot of weight changing in my life, both up and down over the years, and it's very expensive to own really nice clothes that are well fitted.
Right.
When your weight changes a lot, and so it's like depending on the year, maybe I had a jacket for this event, but it probably doesn't fit me anymore.
Probably doesn't fit. Yeah.
My first job, I was very hopeful that I didn't have to wear a jacket, but I did have to wear a button-collared long sleeve shirt and tie to work for like 7 years. It was a financial investment firm, and
that makes sense.
The fact that I didn't have to wear a jacket was like a new thing.
Yeah.
It was like prior to like 2000, you had to wear a suit jacket.
Yeah, I worked for a financial firm right out of college, so but I was an admin, so I didn't have to adhere to the. Yeah. We were like the only
formal,
ones.
Normal.
We could do business like casual, and everybody else had to do like full suits. And I was like, thank goodness I am not an accountant. I mean, they were making obviously way more money than I was. I was making nothing at that job.
I still would rather wear a blouse and a skirt over a suit jacket.
Oh yeah, I don't blame you at all.
As a blouse is basically a t-shirt. They need to be kind of fancy. I like satins and silk, so I'm on team.
Yeah, you would have been
team blouses.
Yeah. So we go to credits quickly. We are then back to the scene. Sarah's there, taking pictures. Nick arrives, and I had to laugh because like Grissom was like, "Oh, like let's go up to the room." Like to Nick, you know, Sarah's like, "Oh, like we'll meet you there." And so Grissom and Nick go up to the room. Sarah and Catherine are directly right behind them.
Yep.
So, it just felt very weird. Like, it just did not feel well timed. It felt like Grissom and Nick should have went into the room, and then Sarah and Catherine should have come in, like, with some level of time difference. But there was, like, next to no. But we learned that the victim was staying in, quote-unquote, Murder Central. And...
What's that?
What is that?
You don't know what Murder Central is?
You know what Murder Central is? Grissom and Sarah are going to process the room. Nick and Catherine are set to work the elevator. We go to Jim Brass with who we learn is the victim's wife outside the hospital. And this is both Nick and I's spot the guest star for this episode.
Yeah, pretty big one.
Pretty big one. This is Marcia Cross. Probably best known for her role in Desperate Housewives as Bree Hodge, and then I'm guessing she gets married at some point in the show because it's Bree Hodge and it's also Bree Van de Kamp. So she must get married. She must get married at some point during the show and go from being Bree Hodge to being Bree Vanderkamp.
As somebody who has pretty much seen 0 episodes of Desperate Housewives, I can confirm that she's probably known for Desperate Housewives. I discovered during the research portion that I knew this person's name was Marsha Cross, and then was like, what do I know them from?
Yeah, like how do I know
them? I have like never seen anything with them in it. I was like, oh yeah, Desperate Housewives, that's a big show. And I was like, well, like, why do I know them? And then I started looking at everybody else who's a major character in Desperate Housewives. And I was like, I know who all of these people are.
Yeah.
Eva Longoria, Felicity Huffman. I was like, but I've never seen this show. It's just that show is so
it got so
big
much media attention
when it was out. Yeah, like in talk shows, and different things, and tabloids or whatever. Yeah. That it was everywhere. I was like, oh yeah. Although Felicity Huffman is also well known for bribing her kids' college.
That's true. But she was not at the time. Now she's known for it. Yeah. She was not known at the time.
I believe she's married to one of my favorite actors of all time, William H. Macy.
Oh yeah.
AKA the Shoveler from the hit movie Mystery Men with Ben Stiller and Paul Rubin.
Oh, I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite movies of all time. So, Janine Garofalo is in that movie.
Oh, I really like Janine Garofalo.
It's a great movie. It's a very weird movie. I'm not saying it's a good movie for average people.
Yeah,
it's a great movie for unaverage people.
Fair, totally fair. So we learn that her husband is in surgery. We also learn that he has had quite a few affairs. He is a not faithful partner to his wife. Allegedly.
As the rest of the episode implies, I question how
we don't know for sure. But according to his wife in this moment, he has a lot of affairs. So the
word for that is hearsay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it would not hold up in a court of law. We return to Chris and Sarah. They're in the hotel room. Sarah's like, oh, the room is speaking to us, right? And so we realize that they had champagne, but there was no lipstick on the glass, which kind of like lends towards this quote unquote mystery mail caller into 911.
The biggest red herring of this whole episode.
It's so weird. And, then there's indications that sexual intercourse happened in the room. Sarah finds a bra, size 34C, and which prompts them to be like, well, like if the victim was with a woman, like who was this mysterious 911 caller? We pop away. Oh,
I have to. Yes, I have to derail this episode right now.
Oh my gosh! All right, we're derailing. Let's go.
Last episode, I think we got epithelial cells from the most inane places possible. There is zero attempt in this episode to check this bra for an ounce of DNA evidence.
This is true. This is very true.
It never comes up again. No one ever asks any of the women in this episode
what their bra sizes
are. Yeah. There's another piece of evidence that comes up in another part of this hotel momentarily. They never check for it in the hotel room. They never address whether it's collected. The lack of skin-based DNA evidence collection in this episode is downright appalling. And I think the end result of this episode is a direct result of the mismanagement of the now returning supervisor Gil Grissom. Where Warwick, the assistant
would have been
acting supervisor, I think that this case would have been solved.
Yeah, I mean, good point. Good. I'm curious, listeners, if you agree with that statement or not.
I mostly say that because Warwick basically has no part in this episode.
He has almost no part in this episode. I feel bad.
All filler.
Yeah. But we pop on, we return to Catherine and Nick. They're in the elevator. Catherine finds white specks. Nick is like, oh, is it cocaine? And Catherine's like, no, it's not. And he's like, how do you know? And she's like, I just really love on this rewatch through. I feel like I appreciate Catherine in a way that I've never appreciated Catherine watching CSI. She is amazing. She is such a good character.
She has such like self-confidence in everything.
Yes, it's great. I mean? Like, I love it. I love
she's everything. Just 100% herself.
I love everything about it. So Nick then enters the hotel room. I jokingly was like, product placement for No Nexel 9 because Sarah's like, oh, I bring it to like every hotel room.
Google what it was.
I was like, oh, is this a product I jokingly was like, product placement. We haven't had one in a while.
I wrote down the same thing. You know, I was like,
yep.
Well, here's the thing. She made it sound like it was this like
and
miracle cleanser. And then I looked up what it was and I was like, wait, what is she actually saying in this scene? Is she saying she has like unprotected sex in hotel rooms all the time? Or is she saying that hotel rooms are clean and this product that happens to kill sperm, I use it in like spray form or something? It was very weird. And her interaction with Grissom just makes it that much weirder.
It is a weird. It is a weird.
It would have been better if I had never Googled it.
Yeah, good. I did not, which is, I agree. Better to just not know.
Yeah. I thought I would find like, I was like, okay, yeah. It uses. I was like, okay, but it probably is also like a Lysol competitor.
Yeah,
or like,
yeah.
Nope. No, it's basically. I mean, it's like the first like 90% of the Wikipedia article is just about all the different anti-contraceptive uses it has.
So weird. I mean, you do you, Sarah. We're not here to judge. But so they end up scanning the room for stains. Grissom is like, hey, Nick, Sarah, you can do the collection. I'm going to peace out. But before he does, he explains the definition of murder central. Because obviously Sarah didn't know it. Not to Nick, who asked what it was. He does it to Sarah, who did not ask what it was. And I was like...
It's kind of like...
gross.
I was going to say douchey, but I guess it's the same word. It's like he could have had her back unnecessarily. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like he could have just like been like, "Hey, Nick, you want to know what it was?" But instead, he felt the need to attack her. Right?
Right. Yes.
Like I'm telling you, Sarah, because I don't. Because like Nick, I know that you don't know, and I just want to make a big deal of it in this moment.
Yeah.
Even though I have nothing. Nick has something to gain from it.
Right.
Nick, if he had like asked not Sarah,
Catherine,
and Catherine explained it to him, he could have been like, he could have had that line, right? And it would have like made sense. Grissom is just unnecessarily dragging his subordinate through the mud in front of her peer for no good reason. He just should have said, FYI, Nick, and Sarah, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, like
you know what I mean? Or like that would have been cool if you want to throw like a small amount of shade, Grissom, that's okay.
Yeah.
You cast an umbrella like shade that could have eclipse level block out the sun shade at Sarah in this episode.
No reason.
And I think it's just a metaphor for how dirty they do Sarah in every episode. Show. She is like, if Catherine is like a female empowerment story in these episodes, like Sarah is like the real life experience of most women in this show.
Yes.
Where men do not give her the appropriate amount of respect.
No, never. Yeah. So we return to Catherine, though, which is good. We go to Catherine with Greg Sanders. We learned that the trace is, in fact, not cocaine. It is dandruff. And Greg Sanders also gets, a little vulnerable with Catherine and is like, hey, do you think Sarah would like ever go out with me? And I mean, Catherine immediately like crushes his dreams, but at least he felt like he could be vulnerable and ask Catherine.
The word you're looking for is honesty.
Well, I know, but there's ways to, say that without being quite as direct as Catherine was, man.
I don't disagree with you, but if you're going to be that left field of it, like she just brings that question on Catherine.
Yeah.
No zero context, zero preface. Like she's just like, Sarah has had enough. She doesn't need you just randomly hitting at her in the workplace.
Yeah, like in the workplace. The shift. Yeah.
She's just like shutting it down. I actually think that's an appropriate level.
Yeah.
There's this weird coy relationship between those two characters, right?
Yeah.
I love the
because they were like dusting each other's. Yeah, they were dusting each other's shoulders off.
It's a little creepy as Sanders is trying to touch Catherine, like you know what I mean, like really uncomfortably, and then she just does the same thing back to him. Yeah, she shuts them down. I think they have the appropriate amount of relationship.
That's fair. We go to Catherine and Warwick in the hallway. We learned that one of Warwick's first cases was actually at the Fairmount house, was like a quote unquote accidental discharge of a weapon. But now Warwick is kind of like rethinking that and wants to kind of like go back and like re-examine the case, which is basically all Warwick gets this episode. Sorry, Warwick, you're a very, very minor character in
the best part is
the best part
is, we'll get there, but the only real CSI work is done by a computer.
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes. We're with Nick and Sarah back in the hotel room. They collect a condom off of one of the fixtures from the wall. And then they and I get it. I get that in this show they have to explain fairly basic concepts to the audience, right? This is one of the first investigative crime series, but they had to explain that male DNA is inside the condom and female DNA is outside the condom. And I was like, yes, duh. Obvious. I mean, if you had sex, if the sex was between a man and a woman, you could also use condoms for other things. But just saying, if that's the use case for it, then yes, male DNA inside, female DNA outside.
Although I feel like the opportunity for cross-contamination is probably pretty high.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, I mean, you saw the stains that were in that room when they were scanning.
I mean, just between the two people, sometimes people start off not thinking about protection. Yep. You know what I mean?
Yep. No,
can commingle some DNA ahead of time.
I get what you're saying. I appreciate that you're trying to keep us in the PG-ish range, so I don't have to put explicit content warnings on this podcast.
Yeah.
When I upload it,
people are not always the most responsible adults.
This is very true. We go to Jim Brass and Grissom there's a lot of walk and talks in this episode, but this is a Jim Brass and Grissom walk and talk. And Jim Brass is letting Grissom know that the wife says that husband was a player, had a lot of different affairs. This is where we also learn that the 911 tape was lost. So could have been a dude, might not have been a dude, could have been an older woman, could have been a woman whispering. Never mind about a very beginning of the episode, solid dude on 911 call becoming could be, maybe not.
What a big deal this would be. You know what I mean? I'm sure it's interesting because this is one of those areas where I get into the part of me is it feels very manipulative as a storyteller. There was a guy and we had this whole subplot that we kind of abandon and throw out, and the 911 the 911 call was lost.
This was not on 911.
But at the same time, stuff like that happens. It's great for there to be representation of that, in the show.
Yeah.
But it's that, and then it's, I don't know, it's just for a TV show to do that, it feels very fillery.
Yes.
They didn't do the best job of using that misdirection.
No, they did not.
And with the audience, right? To there wasn't a male suspect that we spent 10 minutes chasing down because of it. And that's the part that I feel you need to do. I feel you have to do that kind of thing. Instead, it was really just more filler. You know what I mean? We wrote some dialogue about this and then it happened. These things happen sometimes. It's great. It's almost fortuitous because one of my favorite parts about this episode, spoiler alert, is that nothing comes of the CSI work.
No.
And that's a really hard thing to pull off well without making the episode feel like a waste of your time.
Yeah.
In fact, I forget what Grissom's exact line is. It probably should be the name of this podcast episode, but it's sometimes science isn't enough.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just there's a amount of luck and there's amount of human aspects that play into all of these cases.
Right.
And if you're gonna go off the rails on something like this, I wanted to play out more.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to just have it and then just move on from it was a little unfulfilling.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
The phrase is.
So after we learn this information, we go to Grissom with Doc Robbins. This is where okay, victim actually did die. Victim is actually dead. Wasn't quite dead at the beginning. Now totally dead. Died from an aneurysm that Doc Robbins is it's genetic. Both of his parents died from aneurysms. He just died from a genetic aneurysm. And we also learned that he was an organ donor and a whole bunch of his organs were taken. He was Frankensteined up.
They never explained if he was actually an organ donor or if his wife just said he was an organ donor.
Yeah, that's true.
I really wanted that to come out. And then I got to the end of the episode, I was oh, they never addressed that.
She just says that he said he wanted to be, and so she did it. But we don't, again.
But later on in the
saying,
episode, we learn there's maybe a reason why she would lie about that.
Yes. Oh, for sure. So we return to Greg Sanders with Sarah. He's like asking her to take a break at the same time. And you could tell that Sarah is not understanding the connotation of this ass. So she's like, yeah, whatever. Sure, man. Like, we could take a break together.
This is Catherine's fault.
No,
she was like, don't tell her it's a date.
Yeah. So,
which, you know.
So Sarah agrees. But again, you can kind of tell that like she's not understanding the connotation of this. But she's kind of looking at pictures. And then she's like stripes and like pieces out of the room. So we get our next walk and talk with Sarah. We had this
in another episode, right? Stripes in the fingernails.
Might have. I know this from true crime. I know this from true crime stuff. So
I felt like as an audience member, I was supposed to know what this meant, and I was like, I vaguely remembered it, but even if someone who's watched, you know, all of the last 30-something episodes in the last 6 or 8 months, to me, it was still kind of lost. I thought they were going to call back to it. I kept waiting for them to say, remember the case?
Yeah, remember this case?
Yeah, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, so they remind us that the stripes are from toxicity. They're called Mies lines, and they are often a result of heavy metal poisoning. So Greg and Sarah then go to Doc Robbins to get the body, but he released the body because Grissom miscommunicated again. Because Grissom is just not the best communicator, as we have well learned from the show.
I was a little confused when he was like, I'll notify the police. I was like, about what?
Yeah, and obviously, Doc Robbins thought the same thing. So we learned that the body's been taken to like a mortuary. Sarah's like, cool, I'll go chase it down. But the next thing we see is Sarah like staring into a furnace, like a blazing fire. And we learn that his wife, Julia, not only approved the organ donation, but also approved his cremation. So he is cremated.
We also had the world's sketchiest organ or funeral director back again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I was like, welcome back, buddy.
This guy has had quite a run. And this is 3 or 4 episodes he's been in.
Yeah, I was like, good for you, man. His name is Kelly Connell, because I'm just looking at his...
Oh, yeah.
At his IMDb right here. But we have a short scene with Sarah examining the ashes. Sarah and Jim Brass are then with Julia. They're just giving her all the details. Again, no lawyer present. Why? Like, let's just be... But they're just like, hey, yeah, your husband was poisoned. And the poison was selenium. And, like, was his breath garlicky? Like, they're just asking her all these, like, random... They're, like, telling her all this information about the case. And giving her all these details. And then, like, asking her some questions. Again, no lawyer, no rights given. Just...
Yeah, willy-nilly like, do you suspect her? Do you not suspect her? Because, like, if you suspect her, you shouldn't be telling her all these things.
Yeah, it was very weird.
You know, if you really suspect her, you should probably have a lawyer. You know, you should probably read her her rights.
Write her rights and have her lawyer present. But nope, they don't do any of that. We pop on over to Nick. He's in a hospital room. He's there with a patient who's in, a hospital bed, as well as the doctor. And we learn that this patient is the recipient of one of the victim's organs, his kidney. And Nick wants to get a sample of the kidney via scope. Patient declines, which I can understand. Like, he's waited years and years for this, this transplant, and he doesn't want to be operated on again. But he tells Nick the story about how his watch stopped at 11 o'clock while the operation was taking place. So this comes back later, which is why I'm mentioning it here.
I should have written it down. At this point, I was like, this guy's going to die. Yeah, his watch stopped at the 11th hour.
Yeah, the 11th hour.
I was like, this guy is definitely not going to make it.
Betty. We have another walk and talk. Again, there's just so many walk and talks in this episode. So we have another walk and talk with Grissom and Sarah. Greg Sanders steps out, asks Sarah about like, hey, we're gonna head out and get some food. And Sarah's like, yeah, sorry, nope, like hot case, I got things to do. And so Sarah walks away, and Grissom's like, oh, do you want to clue me in, meaning on the case? And he like starts talking about going out to dinner with Sarah, and Grissom is like, the case, Greg, like I want to know about it.
It's like I don't care.
Yeah. So we pop on over to Catherine. She's at the hospital, and this is where we first meet Claudia Gideon. She is there to pick up the victim Bob's property. They have a bit of an exchange. Crazy enough, Claudia has dandruff. Like very obvious. She's wearing like a black sweater, like super obvious has dandruff. So evidently her shampoo, which comes in later, is not helping her. You need to switch your prescription.
I would like to maybe call out that I don't know the laws are, but it seems very unlikely that
you could just collect her dandruff sample.
You can like in a space like a let's say like a relatively public space, but like you could just like collect evidence off of a person without their consent.
This is the second time
then use it in course.
She did this to what's her name when she took the like spore samples from the fern plant off in autopsy.
She was just in the other episode.
Yeah, she was just in the other episode.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is so random. Time to say it because I had to look it up. This is actually funeral director Randy's last appearance on CSI.
Oh, Randy.
So maybe a moment of silence for the great Randy Gesick, funeral director.
Funeral director. Sorry that we'll
played
never
by
see you.
None other than, let me scroll up. Kelly Connell. Yeah. And he would have to go on and appear in other TV shows. But
but not CSI. Well,
I was just curious, how many episodes has he been in?
Yeah,
and then apparently this was the last one.
Like, this is it. I was going to say, I don't think he's in many more beyond this.
Well, that's what you said with the paper guy.
That is true. And then he was in last episode, and I was like,
that's probably his last one too.
I don't know. I'm not gonna guess anymore on that one, but I just know that he's not in later seasons. So we get brought to Jim Brass and Catherine. They're with Claudia interrogation. She admits to dressing and dragging him to the elevator, but like not having anything to do with his death. She just was like saving face. But they want to talk to her about the shooting that happened several years ago at the Fairmount home. We see Warwick again, finally. Poor Warwick. So we see Warwick, Catherine, and Jim Brass with Claudia.
Alas, poor Warwick.
Alas, poor
I knew him well.
I know, buddy. The shooting doesn't add up. Like, what he took as, like, gospel, as a very new CSI doesn't add up anymore. Someone had to have shot him, given the, like, angle and direction and all. We see this nice little computer recreation of it.
I love how they, like, pinpoint where he was sitting, as if, or where she was sitting,
yes,
like, where he was standing, as if there was, like, no other location in the
in the house that could have made sense. Yeah.
But we also don't see, like, here's the thing, like, if there was blood splatter, it would have been obvious that he wasn't, like, sitting at a table cleaning his gun.
Right.
It's like where they show his shot was like the middle of the entranceway to his house.
Yeah, like just walking into his house, basically.
I also want to say that this scene in the second watch through really made me ponder. They don't say this, but is this the point in which she decides to start poisoning him? Because it was like 4 years ago. Like,
no,
maybe
it wouldn't have taken that long.
Maybe that was the plan.
I guess
what I was saying was like maybe the plan was to poison him, and then she fell in love with him and didn't want to poison him, and then he cheated on her, and then she went back to Claudia and was like, "Yeah, about that poisoning my husband for the money thing, I'm more on board than I was a couple of years ago."
Maybe
because they were married a while. You know
they were married a while. Yeah, this was a long game. This was not a short play.
I feel like that was again, hire me as a writer many years ago. I feel like this was a missed opportunity where they would have been like, this was the turning point. Like, that's how you bring Warwick back in. It's like, you missed this opportunity. That's when she decided to murder her husband. It took a while to get there, but she decided it.
Yeah. So they're basically like, hey, someone shot him. And Claudia's the one who brought him to the hospital. So they're like, you're the one who shot him. And she's like, nope, not it. Like, didn't do it. So
I shot him 4 years ago and he kept me on the payroll.
Yeah. This transitions us to Warwick, Catherine. And I think this might be one of the last times we see Warwick for the rest of this episode. But we go to Warwick, Catherine, and Jim Brass with Julia. She had, again, no lawyer or anything, admits to shooting her husband. I get that her husband's now dead, but like admits to shooting her husband.
I was wondering what the statute of limitations of shooting somebody in Las Vegas
is. But Warwick is like, okay, great, I'm going to present this case to the DA. Like, obviously it has not expired at this point. So,
did you inherit your dead husband's rights to not press charges?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
We would need a very adept lawyer, very specifically trained in criminal law in Clark County, Nevada, to answer that question.
Yeah, let us know, guys, if you meet that criteria, and you can tell us, because I have no idea.
Because you still would have to prove criminal intent, so it would be very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. So we pop on over to Greg Sanders. He is with Grissom. Catherine enters. She's letting them know, like, hey, Claudia admitted to like moving the body, but said she didn't like do anything else. But this is where we also learn that the medication to treat dandruff contains selenium. So we might have found our like so where we get this, where this heavy metal came from that we poisoned him with.
I don't want to call this science with Nick, but you want to know my weird selenium fact? So this episode aired December 13th, 2001. In that same year, on June 8th, 2001, one of the greatest cult classic movies of all time graced the silver screen, called Evolution, starring X-Files David Duchovny.
Okay.
He makes 7-Up Yours commercials, Orlando Jones, and various other movies, Sean William Scott and Julianne Moore.
Okay.
As well as some other guy I don't really recognize. It's a movie about aliens that come to Earth, and very much like Independence Day, but without spaceships. They're very dinosaur-esque, I believe. And through the process of the movie, they discover the aliens, a certain substance is very toxic to them.
Okay.
And that substance is selenium.
Oh, okay.
Which they make sure we all know in classic product placement territory is the primary ingredient in Head and Shoulders shampoo. And they proceed to defeat the aliens with abundant amount of Head and Shoulders shampoo. It is also one of my favorite movies, even though I probably only seen it 2 or 3 times in my entire life. I like to quote a few lines from this movie quite often. But yeah, that is one of my few probably my only other selenium fact that I know is that it's fair, very common in shampoos in general.
Yeah.
Yet alone, but because it's a dandruff shampoo, Head and Shoulders, it makes sense.
Yeah,
it's basically the same shampoo.
Yeah. This brings us to Catherine and Jim Brass. They're at the Fairmount house. Julia admits them into Claudia's office. Catherine finds the dandruff shampoo. Claudia returns. Catherine also finds garlic cream cheese. And then there's the first of several, like, tiffs between Julia and Claudia. So they're kind of, like, sniping back and forth at each other.
I love
Jim Brass basically, like, breaks it up. And
the second watch of this scene, I was like, this is so genius, because they're
setting the stage.
In cahoots.
They're in cahoots. Yeah.
And yet they're playing everyone, including the audience. And it's like, you're supposed to make them think that they aren't. And maybe there's some real sentiment to this, but there
could be. Yeah. We don't learn that one way or the other, but
spoiler alert, whoever killed who, they both were involved. They both.
Oh yeah. They both knew what was up. Like, regardless of who did the actual poisoning or not, they both knew what the plan was.
It was a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
And so they got exactly what they wanted.
Yeah.
So I don't imagine there's really anything to be resentful about. So, it's definitely a super cahoots moment, and really well acted by otherwise not professional actors. That's the thing, is the best part about like normal people being really good actors is that they're always played by actors.
Yes, this is true.
True. So they're good actors. Of course, they're really good at it. They're professionals, but they're not supposed to be.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be.
Really good acting is bad acting.
Yes. We leave this scene behind. We go to Nick re-entering the hospital room. We learn that the patient's body is rejecting the organ. It has supposedly nothing to do with the heavy metal poisoning, but he's basically like, hey, if it's going to like help solve this case, then you can take a part of my kidney, because like it's failing anyway.
Yeah, I have no idea what the percentage is, but this is definitely a very real problem.
Oh yeah. Today. Oh, it's for sure. Like antibiotic, like your body just rejects it, even if like quote unquote it's a match. Your body is still like, I don't recognize this as being part of my body, so I'm going to attack it. It's definitely a fairly common risk of any transplant. So we have a scene with Nick talking to Grissom. Nick, again, this is just such a like, Grissom, you're just not good at this. Nick is like pouring his heart out about how he's like really struggling with, we learn the patient's name is Carl Mercer. That Carl Mercer is basically like willing to die sooner to possibly help him with the case. And Nick is like, I don't know if if solving a case is worth hurting the living in order to do so. And Grissom basically just brushes this entire conversation off. Like, just does it. It's just kind of like, whatever. Like, he gave the okay. Who cares? And I was like, wow, Grissom, could we just like a touch of empathy, Grissom, please?
They don't really get into it. It's a little weird because like,
no, because then Sarah
make it sound like it's endoscopic, and other than the fact that it's potentially risking an infection, like maybe in wholesale, there's nothing inherently dangerous about it. It's just like it could introduce something that could then and shorten his life, and obviously without a liver he's going to be less likely to battle anything.
Kidney,
and so it's kind of like but it's a very weird scene, but it's
because
you hit on the important part, which is that Nick is like, is this really worth
he's like having a moral conundrum, right? Like he's having a moral, like,
also, like, couldn't we just wait? If he's only got a short period of time, couldn't we just wait?
Yeah.
And Grissom is apathetic.
Yeah. And then we kind of drop this anyway because Sarah enters, and we move over to Sarah with Nick and Grissom in another room. We learn that the prints on the champagne bottle are upside down because, like, the champagne bottle was like, like, whatever. And they make it sound like
funny.
They make it sound like, wow, so crazy that the prints were upside down. And then it's like when they showed you the reenactment, you're like, yeah, duh. Like, of course that can happen. I don't know why you're acting like this is such a weird thing.
One of the funniest parts of this is that like it's almost like meaningless in today's society, because like we would basically just have computers that check both directions for you.
Oh yeah.
But like the computing power was almost taxing enough back then that like they didn't just automatically check. Yeah.
But we learned once we have the prints anchored in the correct direction that they belong to Mrs. Fairmount. So we pop on over to Jim Brass interrogating Julia. Nick, Sarah, and Grissom are watching. She admits to the quote unquote affair with her own husband. Like, she's like, yep, I was in the room. He like fit me in between business meetings. And she also seems to know a lot about poison.
You can call me
no lawyer or anything, just giving up the deets.
I know they don't go forward with this, but you can call me a bad juror. But if you're a defense attorney, feel free to dig this out. Any sort of pretrial motion later on in life.
Yes,
I've done my fair time on juries.
I've done zero.
I don't think I would look at this and be like, oh, this lady's, there's not enough evidence. There's not a reasonable doubt for this lady. I'd be like, these people are up to something.
Yeah, something afoot here.
My definition of reasonable doubt has really come down over the years.
Yeah. We go to Sarah and Grissom. They're with like the ashy remains of the victim. We learn that she had the crowns removed because they were like, oh, the crowns should like still retain some of this, but
how much money could there possibly be in a couple of gold crowns?
I don't think she did it for money reasons. I think she did it because she is savvy when it comes to poisons and knew that it could retain it.
Oh, I don't think I got that. Is that
they don't confirm that. Oh, okay. I think, but maybe I'm giving the character too much credit, and she is just a horrendous gold digger and is like willing to take even the crowns off of his teeth to make a few extra bucks.
I could even go down that whole gold digger thing, and it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, gold is worth a lot of money, but like we're talking about fractions of like hundreds of dollars at most, right?
Yeah.
And then pawn it off maybe like $200 at maximum. It wouldn't surprise me if the number was like 50. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, presumably this guy's worth a lot more money than that. That like this is not something you would care about.
Yeah.
I felt like they were doing trying to make you suspicious of her, but at this point, like, do we need that?
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm pretty suspicious.
But we learned that the most important component to poisoning is patience.
Patience. They don't explain this ever again, this episode.
Nope. Well, yeah, no, they don't really. But
they just say that it's true.
Yeah, they just say it's true. And then we go to Julia. She's at her car, or like approaching her car. She's like groaning, and then Nick comes up to her because she's like acting like she's in distress. He calls for an ambulance. We have a very quick scene with Greg Sanders on a computer that we'll come back to in a moment. But then we are with Nick, Catherine, and Grissom. They're in the hallway. Nick is letting them know that Julia at the hospital got a medication or a treatment that would counteract heavy metal poisoning. So now it looks like, oh, your poisoner is being poisoned, right? Bum, bum, bum. So we go to...
I assume that meant it was supposed to mean it was in the champagne, but then they never cover it again.
They never go back to that. They say they're going to test the champagne, but they never say if it's in the champagne or not. But we are with Jim Brass. He's with Claudia. Claudia's like, well, Julia's obviously trying to frame me, right? Like that's obviously what's going on here. She's trying to frame me, which we then cut over to Jim Brass with Julia. She's throwing shade at Claudia, being like, obviously Claudia. And then we have one quick, back to Claudia and Jim Brass. And Claudia is still basically like, well, we're not going to solve this until, Julia tells you, what the truth is, because, obviously I didn't do it. So then Sarah approaches Greg Sanders. He's printing out something for her.
Greg?
Hey. I was just printing something out for you. On your hot case.
From the internet?
Yeah, I was on break, had some time. Thought, hey. Yeah, sorry, I drew a blank on the wife.
I could really just kiss you right now.
Sarah is so overjoyed at what he prints out that she could kiss him. She doesn't. He kind of expectantly is like, oh yeah. And then she's out. Hot case, right? She's got work to do.
He wishes.
Yeah. So then we learn that Claudia's husband, former husband, also rich, also died young. Also organs removed.
Also died young of selenium poisoning.
Well, they didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
they don't know that at this point. They just know that he died young, organs were removed, cremated. Nick walks up with a warrant.
Was his feelings also? I think they say that. Oh no, just the organs in it. I was like, did they also say his feelings were removed?
I don't think that they mentioned that, but I could be wrong. I might have missed it. There was a lot of notes. There was a lot of notes to take during this episode. This was a difficult one.
A lot of things happen really fast for a one plot episode.
Yes, a lot happens. Really,
there's a lot involved.
Yeah. So they exhume the body of one of the organ recipients of Claudia's husband.
I'm no scientist, despite Science with Nick times. I was like, when they were exhuming the body, I was like, is that a thing you could, it's been a decade, right?
Yeah, so they sort of address this in the next scene. We are with Nick with Doc Robbins, and Doc Robbins says, hey, the liver is degraded, but you should still be able to test for the presence of heavy, the metal should still be there even though the liver is degraded. So Nick grinds up the liver for testing for heavy metal. A whole
liver, despite his need for a few drops.
Just a tiny little bloop bloop. So Sarah, walks up as Nick is doing the testing, and Nick's like, hey, guess what we got in the sample? Selenium. But it's not the same formula as the one in the shampoo. This is one from supplements injected into farm animals, which, crazy enough, it was Gideon's Dairy and Cheese is where Claudia's husband made his money and where they lived. And also their secretary was Julia. What?
Who wouldn't convict these people? Statistically speaking.
So then it's woman versus woman. It's Sarah and Catherine interrogating Julia and Claudia. And they're sticking with their original plan, which is we're just going to say the other one did it.
Yeah.
Claudia's going to say Julia did it. Julia's going to say Claudia did it. And we see a reenactment, though, of Claudia standing over the dead assumed dead body of her husband, and Julia walks in, and Claudia's basically cuts her in on the money. She's like, hey, I'm going to come into a lot of money. And Julia's like, we're going to come into a lot of money. And so this is supposed to be like the initial start of this like pairing between them. They do say that the difference, though, between, which I don't know like quite how they know this, but supposedly the difference between Claudia and her husband and Julia and Bob Fairmount is that Julia actually loved Bob.
Well, because she shot him in the groin.
Yeah, for having an affair.
Cheating on her.
Yeah.
Which is why I was like, is the point that like that's when she decided to poison him? Because like I loved him and I wasn't going to kill him even though I was supposed to.
Yeah.
But then he cheated on me, and so
so now I'll move forward with the
and
plan.
it's probably like I also thought there would be a whole thing where it's like the secretary was the one who like, just your husband has dinner tonight.
Yeah. Wink,
nudge, I know you don't want to kill him anymore because you love him.
Yeah.
But just he's having dinner tonight with a Playboy bunny or something.
Yeah.
And so now you'll hate him and poison him with me so we could become millionaires again.
Yeah. So Grissom Knox interrupts this interrogation and he lets Sarah and Catherine know. And then I guess shortly after, Julia and Claudia know that the DA is not going to move forward with pressing charges, so they're free to go.
Yeah, there's a whole thing with them, like they're lawyers who we have yet to see be present while they've been interrogated by the police.
Yep.
We're there for the DA, and they allegedly might have access to large sums of money.
Yes.
To which to hire well-paid lawyers. It worked.
Yep, it worked. And so Sarah's obviously frustrated by this. So Grissom follows her outside. This is where they have a conversation where Grissom's like, hey, sometimes like science just isn't enough, right? It's not like the magic bullet that solves every single case. Sometimes it's not enough. And, they just kind of have a little bit of a back and forth, and Grissom ends the conversation with not letting her know, because she obviously knows, but reminding Sarah that there's no statute of limitation on murder. So like, okay, maybe we can't get them today, but like that doesn't mean that going forward we can't get them.
I do have a question. Is there a statute of limitation on attempted murder? Because you have to remember they did not actually murder this man.
I know he died of an aneurysm. Yeah. They tried to kill him.
Which is probably what their lawyers said to the DA.
Right, like he died of an aneurysm.
What are you charging him with? He died of an aneurysm.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh yeah, attempted murder?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you don't have jack crap.
Maybe. So
the answer is Nevada Revised Statutes 171.0.4 states that the statute of limitations for attempted murder is 8 years.
Ooh, that's not a lot of time.
So I don't know.
We'd be past it. We'd be past it.
2009 was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So Mercer Cross is free to return to the state of Nevada.
Yes, she is. So
no offense to Mercer Cross herself. I know you're.
No, she seems.
The character.
I'm sure she's a lovely lady. Who knows? But so that ends our episode. So Nick, what did you think about today's episode?
It was okay. I feel like I think it's been a long time since I have had this experience. The second watching of this episode did not make the episode better. It was definitely downgraded the episode.
Yep.
I like half of my notes are things that I wrote down during the second watch where I was like, wait, why didn't they do this? Wait, what? I talked about this evidence stuff earlier. Dandruff and bra and like all these pieces of evidence from the hotel room. It like really set me up for failure once I knew what happened. I was like, you didn't even chase these things down.
Yeah.
These are often like linchpin pieces of evidence in other episodes.
Nope. Not here.
I, in general, like the theme of the episode. I thought they did a good job in terms of like having an episode where they don't solve a case.
Yes.
But they almost unnecessarily fogged the evidence with like red herrings and distractions and
that wasn't really necessary.
Things they didn't follow through with. That if you instead gave for all the things that were going on in this episode, because there was a lot, if you gave a few choice ones their right time in the sun and followed them through and just had it play out in a way that was thorough but inconclusive, I think I would have had a higher appreciation for the episode.
Yes.
Instead, it felt like you threw out a bunch of stuff and then you focused on the stuff you wanted to focus on.
Yeah.
And then you just you just had this drama of these two characters pitted against each other, but kind of in working together.
Yeah.
And like, you're trying to like figure the evidence, but you're also not really addressing the fact that this guy literally died of something unrelated to everything you're researching.
Yes.
Like, he just had an aneurysm in an elevator. They never said, oh, selenium poisoning increases odds for an aneurysm or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, as far as we know, it's irrelevant that they were trying to poison him.
Yeah.
He would have died months later of selenium poisoning, sure. But he died in the elevator, or he died in the bedroom, and then he was dragged into an elevator. Who dragged him into the elevator? There's no dandruff in the hallway. There's no dandruff in the bedroom. There's no dandruff.
They said Claudia did.
Well, they said he dressed him.
No, they also said that she dragged.
Yeah. But like, they never like search for those things. And so like, that's the kind of like, that's the thing that made me say like, well, you just kind of phoned this part in.
Yeah.
And that's like really what drug the episode down for me on the second watch through. I was just like, now that I know what happened, all these gaps, all these things that you kind of glossed over, they like glare.
Yes.
And usually like the best episodes for me are ones where I go back and I go, oh, you guys are so clever. You literally covered this base.
Yeah.
I didn't even catch it the first time. And this wasn't one of those. And that's why I love watching these episodes twice.
Yeah.
I think it makes this experience so much richer because you get to like experience the episodes for the first time and I get to see how they are. And then I get to like rewatch them through the eyes of like somebody who's seen the show before.
Right.
And see all the little things that they do, or in this case, didn't do. And like that usually, that's one of the biggest things for me. There's not really a lot of character development in this episode, right? No individual characters. There's nothing really novel or special in that, and so yeah, I think that I wouldn't call it my least. We had some rough episodes at the start of the season.
Yeah, we did.
This is not going to be at the bottom 3. I think at the end of the episode, it's just going to be somewhere in the bottom end of the pack.
Yeah, so for me, Nick already knows this, but I thought from the thumbnail that this was an entirely different episode. So for those who are CSI savvy or have, watched it before.
Avid
fans. I thought this was the season 5, which again, shocked that I thought it was like season 3 this episode was in. Once I realized it wasn't this episode. But season 5, episode 15, called King Baby. I thought it was that episode, and I like that episode. And so I was like, sweet, it's going to be that episode. And then like 90 seconds in, I was like, this is not that episode. And then I was like, oh yeah, right, this is this episode. So yeah, not the worst episode of the season. Certainly not the best. Poor Warwick had next to nothing in it. Sarah continues to get treated dirty. I feel like Catherine's the only one that like kind of comes out like looking okay. And Nick too. I think like Nick has like a nice, when he's worried about the patient, I think it's nice to give Nick a moment of like moral quandary. Like, but I think beyond that, yeah, there was like just a lot of avenues that they sent us down for no reason and a lot of evidence that they didn't follow up on. And then they're like, well, science isn't enough. No, it's not enough when you don't examine the evidence. Like when you just ignore like all this evidence, it's not enough. That's it. Yeah, Grissom, you're right. It's not enough when you don't put the work in. Sometimes
you have to do the effort and the science.
Yeah, but we will be back next week with season 2, episode 12. You've got mail,
which I only know because my episode auto played.
Oh, and you were like, wait a second.
I thought I paused it and I went to the restroom and I came back and there was like someone on a horse.
And you were like, what?
I was like, oh no, stop, spoiler.
You're like, no, this is the next episode.
And I paused it and you saw the episode, You've Got Mail, and I got the I assume this is around the time the Meg Ryan or reference to the Meg Ryan Tom Hanks movie.
That's what I would imagine is the reference. Mm-hmm. But it's male as in the gender construct and not male as in a letter that you get in your mailbox. But so we'll be back next week with that. In the meantime, you can find us on Patreon at Who Are You, a CSI podcast. You can also find us on Facebook at Who Are You, a CSI podcast. We are also on Twitter /X, Instagram, and Threads at Who Are You, CSI pod. You can also email us at whoareyoucsipod@gmail.com. But otherwise, we will talk to you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.